Hello and welcome to another episode of midierror, where we speak to all sorts of people who work within sound and music. On the show this time we have Fiona Brice, who's an amazingly talented human being who's not only a singer, a violinist and an orchestral arranger. She's also played and collaborated with a number of huge artists including John Grant, Anna Calvi, Kelly Jones, Kanye West, Jay-Z. The list really does go on there. She toured with Placebo for over 10 years and has also released her own solo material, Postcards From, on Bella Union, and has a follow-up album coming out next year. I really appreciate all the support from everyone. If you want to support the podcast, you can do that by liking and sharing and commenting. You can also donate via PayPal or via Ko-fi if you like. But enough of that, let's get on with the show. And the first thing that I asked Fiona was about her musical beginnings.
It's quite distinctive actually. Like the really earliest memory is I had one of those this little toy thing you pull a string and it used to play a nursery rhyme, and it played like Brahms' Lullaby, and I used to listen to that to go to sleep when I was really, really young, so that's just like ingrained in there somewhere. But when I was about 4, my mum gave me a cassette recorder that you could record on. She was an audio secretary, and she gave me a cassette recorder, and I just used to play with this thing, and it had a microphone. And so like when I was really, really young, I started recording my voice and hearing and making noises and little songs and stuff. And that's before I played an instrument. So that was like my first experience with audio, I suppose. And then I just got into music at school, you know, the stuff that was offered, like recorder, whatever they were offering really. Violin teacher came round to the village school and said, would anyone like to play the violin? So I didn't really, it's weird. It's like I didn't really know. It's not like he said, would you like to play violin or any of the other instruments? It was just, there was a violin going. So I thought I'd have a go at that. And then we got a piano in the house because some friends were moving and they didn't have anywhere else to put it. So it's like, it all kind of happens by chance, you know, but that was my experience of like physical playing instruments and stuff. But in terms of what was being played in the house, Mum and Dad had fairly sort of mainstream tastes, I'd say, you know, Beatles, ABBA was a big thing in the house. But my dad also listened to quite a lot of classical music. There was he also had quite a lot of vinyl, my dad, quite a lot of singles. So there was always records in the house, but they weren't massive music lovers. But yeah, ABBA, Beatles for sure. And then just this weird collection of records that my dad would play, like Jerry Lee Lewis sometimes, and then just, you know, like 50s. He liked a lot of Chuck Berry, that kind of thing. I think eclectic is definitely the word to sum it up. And my dad used to make tapes so he'd borrow all these vinyl singles from his mates, and then he'd make cassettes, like we used to do mixtapes off the radio, you know, so he had this one in particular that he made. It was a double cassette, and he called it Odds Modern, which is a title I intend to use for a record. So, and it was just the weirdest combination of songs. I mean, I look back on it, and it was just like there was stuff on there like I don't know, there was Adam and the Ants, there was Kim Wilde, there was Richard Harris, MacArthur Park. Like that's a crazy song. Kirsty MacColl, there's a guy who works down the chip shop, claims he's Elvis, like these weird, quirky songs that my dad obviously picked up on. And so I used to listen to these tapes like they were the equivalent of like Now 8 or Now 10, you know, it was like they were my compilations that I used to listen to. So I've got to thank my dad for that in a way, because it was very, very obscure collection of songs. But then if I hear one of those songs now, I'm like, oh wow, that was on my mixtape when I was, 6.
It's amazing having those like homemade mixed collections.
Well, yeah, no one else had it, and I guess I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought that was I thought everyone was listening to that. They definitely weren't.
But like if you're in a relationship and you send each other like CDs that you'd burnt or like mixtapes, like at the time those things are pretty naff, and you're like, oh, I like some of those tracks, some of them are rubbish, but like I think looking back on them, sometimes you're like, oh, that's such an amazing thing that we actually bothered to do that.
Yeah, it took time. It really took time. And I think the last, someone made me a CD, one of those when I started dating them a while ago. This is probably like 2007, I'd say. That's the last time anyone made me a mixtape. I mean, I guess now it's what, a playlist? Share a playlist. Not quite as cool. You can't do the artwork and stuff.
Exactly. You used to draw, like doodle all over the case, especially if you're like posting it to somebody who's from a long way away. They get a letter. It is amazing how many of the people that I've spoke to had that tape recorder as a thing that kicked off their music career. It's like an unbelievable connection between guests, having that one unit with a finite amount of recording time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, it was just that thing of being able to instantly capture an idea on a cassette, even though it was a dumb song that I was singing when I was a child. But I knew that was possible. You know, I can capture an idea. I mean, I wish I still did it, actually. I guess I work in different ways now. But I mean, all through my early years, or even up to teenage years, I used to have two cassettes. Once I started writing songs at the piano, I used to have two cassette recorders so I could multi-track. So I'd record on one cassette recorder. I mean, obviously the audio quality was terrible, but I could get all my ideas down. And then later I got a Tascam, like a 4-track, what was it called? 424, I think. And then I started getting into actually doing it a bit more properly, working out that you could bounce things down and that kind of thing. But yeah, there's something really nice about the kind of the analog quality of that. I miss that a little bit. I'm not such a fan of digital.
Yeah, I do you record? I mean, like in situations now, do you record onto your phone? Do you have something that you can record little ideas onto?
Oh yeah, I mean, I use just voice memos. If I'm just playing the piano and, you know, just suddenly get an idea, then that's obviously, it's the most instant way you can do it, is just quickly record it and then go back to it later when you need to. And I use Logic, and I write all the orchestration and everything that I do is in Sibelius. You know, there's multiple ways to capture ideas, really. But I just feel like the tactile way was more fun somehow. You know, the basic cassette recorder just felt really concrete somehow. And digital stuff, files get lost. I don't know. I feel like it's all a bit transient.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you said that, because on the previous interview, I spoke to a man called Tim Wright, who did the soundtrack to the Wipeout video games, and he was also a video game programmer in like the heyday of like the mid-90s of like the PlayStation era, the first sort of big console that came into the mass market. And he was saying about that transientness of digital, and he was saying that really the analog stuff is the real stuff, like photographs. It's funny, like someone who's grown up with programming computers was not advocating backing up onto a hard drive. He was advocating like having it there, because that can't just like disappear.
Exactly. There is, and it's about ownership as well. You know, I mean, it's like the fact that we don't own our music libraries anymore. You know, we kind of rent music nowadays. We don't own it, as opposed to, you know, vinyl and, you know, the physical product. I mean, it's just an ongoing thing where I feel like we're constantly renting our lives. We're not, you know, you can't. I mean, maybe that's good in terms of we don't all need collections of stuff. It's just landfill, isn't it?
Moving house is a nightmare when you've got loads of vinyl or got CDs. It's heavy.
It's heavy, exactly, and space is, you know, and especially if you've lived in London for any period of time, you suddenly realise that you can't even afford that space. But I don't know. I worry. It's the ownership thing that bugs me. The fact that I don't genuinely own some of the stuff that I've paid for.
Yeah, that's true. And did you go into like formal training with those instruments you listed?
Yeah. So I did all the orchestral training as a sort of like a county youth orchestra stuff when I was a kid, and then I went to the Royal Academy of Music and I did formal Royal Academy in King's College London, and so obviously I did formal violin, conservatoire training, and orchestral. I majored in composition, so yeah, very much a formal music education. It's a pet gripe, but where you quite often see, I don't know, in people's press releases for, especially people in pop, they always say like, you know, classically trained so and so, and you're like, grade 5 on the piano is not classically trained. I'm sorry. It's like, it's just there's a lot more work to be done, you know.
Yeah, it is a bit of a buzz phrase. It's a bit like
people say it all the time. It's like, oh, can you play a chord on guitar? Can you play anything on a piano? Oh, classically trained, you know. So like you've had a lesson once.
Yeah. And
I just feel, I don't know, I'm just being a snob about it, but you know, I put a lot of work in. So it just that phrase bugs me a bit. But and also the the irony is that you then finish your classical training, and if you go on to work with rock bands and stuff, you have to unlearn a whole load of stuff as well, but that's the thing, isn't it? Know the rules, then break the rules. That's the
definitely. It's I read that you sort of said that was in some way creatively stifling, some of that
university.
that
for sure, because because basically I as a teenager I was really into songwriting. Even though I was playing classical violin, I was playing Shostakovich and Bach and stuff on the violin, but I was listening to Prince and Blondie and Velvet Underground and Transvision Vamp, and to me, there wasn't a massive divide between those two things, because in my brain it all made sense, all those musical artists coming together. But obviously when I went on to do university training, they weren't interested in Prince, Blondie and Bowie and and I felt, and they weren't very interested in me songwriting. They were very interested in me studying a Bach chorale, and I was just a bit like, oh, hold on, this is really, it's like some serious pigeonholing going on. It's like, well, there's my learning of music, but then there's my creative side is saying, but this is all valid. If I want to write a violin duet and record it on a Tascam and play with the sound, to me that's a valid composition. And in the environment that I happened to be in the Academy in King's at the time, they weren't really very interested in that. It wasn't a sound design course. It was straight classical. So I did feel that, and I know I'm not the only one to feel this. I did feel like it was kind of disappointing. I mean, the quality of education I got obviously wasn't disappointing, but it wasn't a creative time for me. It was just hard work,
Yeah, that is another thread that runs through a lot of my interviews, in terms of people who have had formal training and stuff, and saying that formal training sort of didn't, or not that it didn't help them, but there are elements of it and there were structures to it that actually didn't help creativity, which is an odd thing, isn't it?
I think I've understood it a bit more, in later life. It's like when you're studying the violin, or the piano or whatever, it's a highly technical, you're being trained to a very high technical level and what you're doing. And that is a slightly different skill to being creative. So being highly proficient on a classical instrument is one thing. I've got plenty of classical musician friends who are incredible performers, but they don't write a note. They don't write it. It's just not their thing. It's a slightly different part of the brain. So, I get it. It's like I was being trained to a high level, which obviously I've benefited from, and that's helped me a lot. But my own sort of whimsical composition interests had to go slightly to one side whilst that was all happening. And I guess I didn't realize that's what I'd signed up for until I was in the middle of it. But not an unusual experience. And then a lot of people that went to music college had a similar kind of thing. It's there's an aspect of beating the personality out of you as much as there is about they kind of want you to conform to a degree. So and
some people like thrive in that environment.
Some people and other people just cannot take it. I mean, plenty of people leave. For some people they do a year and just they're like, nope. This is wrong.
Obviously this interview isn't about me at all, but I didn't go to my graduation at uni because I was just like, I did music tech, which is obviously like a bit of a naff subject really, but I didn't go to my graduation because I was like, fuck you all, because I didn't feel like I felt I was like creatively stifled in that respect. So I can definitely relate to that, and also in terms of classically trained, I think in the music tech world, industry standard is a thing that people put on the end of software.
Exactly.
This is industry standard software. Like, what does that even mean? What does that mean? It just means that you thought that sounds good, so you just tag it on the end of your product.
Industry standards means like at least two other people are using this.
Exactly.